Hello, everyone. My name is Michaela Guthrie and my co-felicitator, Mika Carroll. We are students here at Washington Latin Public Charter School in Washington, D.C., hosting the 2013 Trash Travels Webcast. Here's a short video of why we think the issue of garbage is an important one to discuss.
I bet you think we didn't know, didn't even see the tide change. But it's a small, small world, girl, getting even smaller every day. I bet you think we didn't know, didn't even see the tide change. But it's a small, small world, girl, getting even smaller every day. You can think that it's small for a hollow while, but the kids all run once those bridges burn. The trash washes up to shore, even in this landlocked place. It gets thicker, it's toxic, get it out of my face.
Now we're going to introduce our guest speakers. Today we have with us Brenda Platt. She is the co-director of the Institute of Local Self-Reliance. She's worked 26 years in trash pollution and recycling. She leads kids to replace styrofoam in school trash lunches. Ms. Platt is the founding member of Grassroots Recycling Network. Thank you, Brenda Platt, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Next, we have Laura Chamberlain. Ms. Chamberlain is the program manager of the Trash Free Potomac Watershed Initiative at Alice Ferguson Foundation, which has recruited 16 trash-free schools and more than 100,000 volunteers. Thank you, Ms. Chamberlain, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Next, we have Allison Schutz. Ms. Schutz is the Trash-Free Seas Program Coordinator at Ocean Conservancy. She works to engage and educate volunteers worldwide for the international coastal cleanup and ocean trash prevention. She compiles and analyzes the data collected during the cleanup to create a snapshot of the global ocean trash problem. Thank you for joining us today. Next, we have Kumba Gay. She is 15 years old and a sophomore at Washington Latin. And she is our student panelist for today. Thank you, Kumba.
Thank you, Michaela.
Now we're going to start with our kickoff question. Today's kickoff question is, why is garbage an issue we should be concerned about? Ms. Chamberlain, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, there's kind of two aspects to trash and garbage. One is the waste that we produce here in your school or at home or when you're out and about in the community, and the other is litter. And so we produce waste, and then what do we do with it? So hopefully we're putting it in the trash can and recycling it. But what I worry about is when people aren't even doing that, and they're throwing it on the ground, and it ends up in our rivers and then down to the bay in this area, and then to the ocean. So, and once it gets there, it impacts wildlife. It impacts our quality of life. Who likes to go down to the river and walk next to a trash pile? It's just something that we need to solve, and we need to figure out ways to do it both from the source. What kind of waste are we producing in our schools or in our homes? And then also, how do we capture it?
And I'll just add that trash, of course, is a sign of inefficiency. If you look at nature, nature doesn't generate trash. So we really need to, in our societies, mimic nature's own natural cycles of recycling and composting. And we need to reduce waste. I would say that trash is a sign of unchecked consumption, production and consumption. And I don't know how we ended up with so many single-use disposable products in our society, but we really need to stop single-use.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, in that it's costing us money. I mean, if you think about it, we're throwing away things that a lot of other societies and cultures, especially as Americans, we're throwing away things that other people, could value. I mean, it's a little cliche, but we say some people's trash is other people's treasures. So it's really just costing us money as a society as well. And I think the other panelists really hit on, the other main problems.
I'd just like to agree with all of the other panelists, and would also like to say is that many people are not aware of the amount of trash and the amount of waste that they produce each day. And so once we make people aware, it will decrease the amount of waste that is produced by our society, especially because a lot of people are used to overconsumption of products and things that they use on an everyday basis that does not necessarily need to be thrown away.
Today's poll question is, where does 70% of the 2 million to 50 million tons of electronic waste end up annually? The first answer is recycling facility. The second answer is local landfill. The third is incinerator, and the fourth is developing countries.
All right, so now we're going to turn to one of our subtopics, which is local pollution and how that affects our daily lives and as a community. And so the global effects start locally, and it starts from the bottom up. So we're going to watch a video now, hopefully it'll work this time, of pictures that people have taken around the world of trash in their neighborhood.
Regardless of where you live, garbage is a common sight. Each and every one of us contributes to waste production in our communities. The trash you make today will affect the world tomorrow. What do you want your tomorrow to look like?
So from the video, we saw a lot of trash, but it was in very different communities around the world. And we realized that we all pretty much have the same problem with our pollution. Now we'll ask some questions about the local impacts, and we'll start with Kumba. So in 2009, DC passed a law with a 5-cent tax on all one-use plastic bags. Could you elaborate on that, and does it really have an effect on the amount of plastic we use?
So as Mika has already said, in 2009, DC passed a tax on all single-use plastic bags. Now, single-use plastic bags are the plastic bags that you use on your everyday basis when you go to the grocery store, when you go to any type of convenience store. And so knowing that you live in a city and knowing that it's DC, a lot of people are just like, well, it's a city, it's supposed to be dirty. Well, people bothered by this, they went out into the local ecosystems such as the Anacostia River and the Potomac River, and they decided to do a trash bag count. And when they did this trash bag count, due to the overwhelming amount of trash bags that were found in these water habitats, they decided to bring it to Congress. And so with all of the tallied up trash bags that they found, they brought the statistics to Congress, and so that's how the tax was passed. Now, did it work? I believe that it did work, and according to statistics, it did work. From looking from the difference between 2009 and 2010, they went from a count of 22 million trash bags found in just those two ecosystems, and they brought it down to 3 million. And so that is a really big difference, and it's a good thing knowing that it is changing our society in the way that our parks and places and things of recreation look.
One of the things that I worked on DC's on that bag fee, and we don't like to actually call it a tax. It's actually a fee because you have a choice. As taxes, you often don't have a choice, and so it's also when you collect the fee goes into fund that's helping to do education and outreach and prevention. So it's a fee, not a tax. And the city worked very hard. One of the things I really like about DC's the fee that was placed on single-use bags. It wasn't just plastic bags. It was also on single-use paper bags because it was designed not to drive use of paper bags and increase costs for supermarkets and retailers, because paper bags are more expensive for them to offer than plastic bags, but to drive people to use reusable bags. And there's so many different types on the market, so you have so much choice. And it's really a polluter pays fee. So if you want to use a plastic bag, you can still use a plastic bag, but it's a fee. But one of the things I really like about this bill and the impact of it is it's a great example of local government. I know Kumba mentioned Congress, but actually it was the local city council that passed it. And so much of trash and the impact of trash is on city council budgets. City government really becomes responsible. You know, you talk about unfunded mandates. Our local governments end up picking up the cost for manufacturers' trash that they produce. So this is a great example of local government taking action, at the local level and having impact. And the other thing that's really great about this example of this particular policy is that it gets to the source of the problem. So instead of the plastics industry was promoting, let's just recycle plastic bags. Plastic bags are recyclable. We can collect them and recycle them. Well, what's better? It's better to avoid use of a single-use product. So it's been very successful. Laura has worked extensively on it and has lots to say, I'm sure.
Yes, well, Brenda said most of what I was going to say, but I will say that Montgomery County saw the successes in D.C. and they followed suit. So they now have a 5-cent fee on paper and plastic bags in Montgomery County. And we are also working in the entire state of Maryland this year. The Maryland legislative session, you guys are in D.C. and around the world, so you might not know, but the Maryland legislative session is only 3 months long, so we have 3 months to pass bills and get things to happen. So we have a couple weeks left, and we don't know what's going to happen, but we are working in Maryland, and we have many legislators and citizens around the state that are interested in being the first state in the United States to have a bag fee across the entire state. And just on the point of it working, we do cleanups around the Potomac, which we may get into later. But our Potomac River watershed cleanups have shown a 60% reduction in plastic bags that we found in our cleanups, both in D.C. and then in Montgomery County as well. So people have reduced their use of plastic bags and paper bags, but we're seeing less bags littered, which is the goal of the bill. So.
And I'll just speak on more of a personal note about whether it works or not. I'm new to D.C. relatively within the last year. So I'm from Florida. And so just, living in D.C. and having this bag tax and having the cashiers say, would you like a bag? It just triggers that thing in your brain that goes, oh, no, I don't need a bag. Even I try my hardest, obviously being in this world, to bring my reusable bag. But occasionally you just go to the store and you forget your reusable bag. But here when they ask you, would you like a bag? I mean, I will walk out with my hands absolutely full, cans of soup underneath my arms, just to make sure I don't have to take that plastic bag. In Florida, they don't even ask. They will just go ahead, and if you don't bring your reusable bag, they'll just put everything into a bag for you, which is fine customer service. That's great. But, on a personal note, my use of plastic bags has probably gone to zero. Just, again, on those times where you just walk into the store and you don't have your bag with you. So, again, I didn't work on the bill personally, but I think it's working, especially at least for me and my family. So.
All right, thank you so much. Now we have another question, and this, I think, relates most to Brenda. In your recent report called Stop Trashing the Climate, you said that zero waste was the key to stopping any pollution. And we would like to know how feasible it is for like a city or a school, and even can it be implemented at Washington Latin?
That's a great question. So zero waste, when you first hear zero waste, like, yeah, right, we'll never get to zero waste. And one of the things that's exciting about the zero waste movement, which has been going on around the globe and in the United States for probably more than a decade now, is that often we see businesses taking the lead and having zero waste goals, but now there are dozens of communities that have embraced zero waste planning. And I like to kind of frame it as, it's not that we think we're going to get to zero waste, but it's a planning framework. So if you're not for zero waste, how much waste are you for? And so it's like a goal. So if you only set like a goal of 25% recycling or 50% recycling, what you end up with is a 75% landfilling goal. So your goal should be zero waste, right? And also it's like akin to, you know, a community may have a drug-free zone, or a manufacturer may say, well, we have a goal for zero defects in the products we produce. You know, they don't necessarily think they're going to produce products that have completely, you know, are perfect, but it's a planning goal. So some of the big cities that have embraced zero waste planning, at least in the United States here, are San Francisco. And San Francisco had an interim goal of 75% recycling waste diversion. They're at 78% right now. And that's a big city of 800,000, not to mention the daytime population, very diverse, many languages, apartment buildings, and that includes not just households, but restaurants and businesses as well. And the heart of their program is composting, because literally half of what we set out at the curb is biodegradable, readily compostable. We do very well in the United States composting our yard trimmings, you know, our grass clippings and our brush and our fall leaves, but we haven't really gotten to the banana peels yet. So I like to say, you know, it's banana peel time. We should be collecting those food scraps and turning them into really valuable soil. And goodness knows our soils, you know, really need it. But one of the things that zero waste encompasses is upstream design and redesigning products. So a city like Seattle has basically banned styrofoam. And that was phase one of their kind of food packaging regulations. Under phase two, all food service ware that's offered, if you go to a restaurant or even a food truck, you know, they cannot use any food serviceware that's not, it has to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable. So you will not see a styrofoam cup in Seattle. And so this is just another example of how local governments are kind of changing the rules so that we can move closer towards a zero waste economy. And you alluded, you alluded to the report I did a few years ago, Stop Trashing the Climate. And the reason that moving towards zero waste is so key to protecting the climate is that when we use a product and dispose of it, just to make that product, there are all these upstream uses of materials, virgin materials, energy. So we have to stop using products in order to, avoid use of materials and save energy. So there are benefits all up that value chain. So we're using a cotton shopping bag instead of a plastic bag. We've avoided the mining of those fossil fuels, the production of that plastic, converting those fossil fuels into plastics, and all the stuff that goes along with it. Do you want to add?
You asked, can a school be zero waste? And I'm glad that you asked that question, because one of the projects that we work on at the Alice Ferguson Foundation is our Trash-Free Schools project. And that is, you mentioned we have 16 schools right now. They're mostly in D.C. and in Maryland. We would love to have any school join our program from nearby or around the world. In the program, I brought a guidebook with me, but really the best way to learn about it is to go online, trashfreeschools.org, or to our website. I'm sure you'll be sharing that with everyone. And the program has 8 steps, and you just run through the steps. It doesn't matter. We don't program out what your actions are going to be. The goal is for you to sign the pledge, commit to reducing your waste, and then start tracking it. Brenda mentioned that you're not going to be zero waste tomorrow, but you have to start tracking it, and then you set an action plan for how you're going to actually start reducing that waste. And you identify those gaps that you might have. I see you have a trash can over there, but there's not a recycling bin next to it. So that's a great way to start increasing your recycling, is if you commingle your trash cans and recycling bins. And our guidebook has tools, and our online website has even more resources. So we'd be happy to help you get through that and get going on being trash-free or zero waste.
Thank you, guys.
All right. So this now relates more to things that Laura has been working on. So we would like to know what the Trash-Free Potomac Watershed Initiative is, and how is it implemented in schools?
Sure. So the Trash-Free Potomac Watershed Initiative started in 2005 we have been conducting cleanup since 1989, and so if you do your math, this year is actually our 25th year. But in 2005, we kind of looked around and we're like, okay, so we're going out to the river and we're cleaning up trash, other people's trash, not our trash, and we were tired of it. So we're like, okay, we're going to solve this. And we came up with a framework for how we were going to do that. And so one of those tools that we're using is policy. So we've talked about the bag fee. That's one of the policies that we work on. We also have worked on regulation, which is a little bit confusing, but you may be familiar with the Clean Water Act, and it's a way to hold governments accountable for trash that ends up in the waterways or on our streets and make sure that they're helping to clean it up and to motivate their citizens to clean it up. And then we're using education, public education. Of course, it's actually, in my opinion, the most important thing that we need to be doing, but also the most challenging, because to be sustainable and to really clean up our waterways and our communities, we need to change behavior. And then we work on enforcement. We're working with law enforcement officers to make sure that they understand the laws and that they're enforcing the laws as a tool for changing behavior. And then finally, market-based incentives. So the bag fee is actually a market-based incentive. It's motivating behavior change with an incentive not to be charged for your bag by bringing a reusable. But there are a lot of other incentives too. Businesses can save money by increasing their recycling and composting, and a whole myriad of ways. A school could save money by increasing their composting, recycling, and switching to reusables and things like that. And so we kind of use all those different pieces together to solve the problem. We don't feel that there's one, way that this can be solved. We have to look at all the different solutions, and we encourage a school to do the same thing and figure out how a school could fit into that framework. Is there a policy that a school could put into play that would help you reduce your waste? So we're not going to use styrofoam trays anymore in our school. So that's a policy that you'd have to work through your different forms of governing here at your school to make that happen, but it's a policy. And then you would figure out ways to get reusables in that would save the school money. And then, of course, you're going to do education to make sure that the students understand why you've stopped using styrofoam trays and all of these different tools. And as I said, the Trash Free Schools program that we have can really help you to identify those problem areas that you might have and how we can come up with solutions.
Okay. So one last question before we move on. Now we're moving down the line here. So Allison, in the video we saw trash around the world just on the streets or in people's homes. How does that trash we see every day affect our lives, like our daily lives?
All right, so how does that trash affect our daily lives? Well, I think first and foremost, personally, aesthetically, that's maybe not the highest impact or ecologically impact, but it's something we can all relate to. Do we like going to a park or a beach that's completely littered and has all sorts of trash on it? Not really. We kind of go, I'd rather go somewhere that's a little cleaner. So if you think about it, that then in turn affects our wallet. Those people that rely on us to visit those beaches that we wanted to go travel to, if their beaches is covered in trash and we don't want to go to those beaches, it's then affecting their pocketbooks and it's affecting the economy. And this is not even getting into the ecological impacts. If you think about the trash around the world, whether it's land-based trash from consumer items, we've talked a lot about our single-use items that we use on a daily basis and just dispose of or we litter of, and that gets into our waterways and into our oceans. The ecological impacts of those are pretty significant. They pose ingestion and entanglement risks for wildlife. There's over 250 different ocean species that have been entangled or ingested marine debris. So if you think about it, these are pretty important, impacts. And then there's also the discarded fishing gear. So it's a little bit different than the waste that we've been talking about on a daily basis, but again, huge ecological impacts. It's either lost lost or discarded fishing gear that, you think about these big commercial fishing nets, they end up kind of ghost fishing in the ocean. So again, affecting our pocketbooks, affecting the wildlife in the ocean. So it affects really almost every aspect of our life, from our personal life, again, with the aesthetics, from the economy, something we all really care about, especially right now. And then again, the huge ecological impacts affecting wildlife and our reef systems. You want to add anything?
I'll just say that, in addition to our personal lives, there's no such thing as a way. So, where does our trash go? I mean, it's when it ends up in a landfill, all landfill liners, there's like a plastic liner, engineered liner. They like to call them sanitary landfills, which I think is ridiculous to say the least. But, all landfill liners will eventually leak. And then where does that toxic leachate go? It'll end up in our groundwater. So we're polluting our drinking supplies. When we burn trash, and in our area in Maryland and in Virginia, we rely quite heavily actually on trash burners. And then you pollute the air. And of course, the wind makes neighbors of us all. So there's really no such thing as a way. I mean, and in the oceans, as Allison said, I mean, that's just a really big issue with plastics not biodegrading. So trash really impacts us, and the cost we can't overemphasize, because local community budgets, there's so much spent on trash collection and disposal. So our libraries are starving, our schools are starving for money, and we are, if you look at a city budget, one of the biggest line items is for handling trash. So this is a huge issue at the local level. So it really impacts us. We have global warming now and storm events. So, and it's all related to production and overconsumption. So it's all very much connected and impacting us in so many ways.
All right, thank you. And just a reminder, if you haven't answered our poll question yet, or if you're just joining in online, our poll question is, where does 70% of the 20 million to 50 million tons of electric waste end up annually? 1 is recycling facilities, 2 is local landfills, 3 is the incinerator, and 4 is developing countries. And now we're going to take questions from the audience.
How can you set up a recycling program in your school? And this is specifically, it was a question that sounds like you went to Department of Public Works here in D.C., and they kind of turned you down, which is it's unfortunate that they did that. And it isn't that hard to do it, and the public charter schools should have access to recycling dumpsters and recycling bins, and so I can help connect you. The agency that actually runs the recycling programs is Department of General Services, so I can help connect you guys. That's more of a direct answer, but that it's in my opinion not acceptable for schools not to have recycling, and so if that's a problem, we need to solve it, and we can help you do that. And that's part of the Trash Free Schools program, is we help you to identify those challenges that you might have. And there is to say there are some jurisdictions in our area that do continue to be challenged with recycling programs. It is a cost to set them up in terms of getting the dumpsters and getting the bins in all the classrooms and in the cafeteria. But once they're set up, a school system could save a lot of money by having recycling instead of just sending all their trash to the landfill, which they have to pay tipping fees for. Tipping fees, we'll probably use it again, so I'll explain. When a dump truck goes to the landfill, they have to pay $80, $90, $100 a ton for the trash that they're taking. And so whenever a business or a county or a city can reduce the amount of tons of trash that are going to the landfill, they will save a lot of money. And recycling can do that. Composting can do that. And so again, I will give you the name of a person that can help you get recycling in your school.
Okay, so now we'll be taking some questions from the virtual audience out there. So Fars from Masab bin Omer School, I hope I pronounced that right, says, do you think we can help the environment by using these reusable things?
Absolutely. Reuse. Get rid of, say no to single-use disposable items. I actually have some props, my favorite. So you can take personal responsibility for what you use, you know. I mean, some of us here, Laura, hold up your coffee mug. So, you know, bring a coffee mug, bring a water bottle. I will just say that my standard things that I carry with me, not the disposable fork, but my reusable bag fits in my bag. Yes, would you please? A cloth napkin. Don't use paper napkins. You don't even need them in your home. Cloth napkins. This is actually a bandana. It's so cheap. Remember these? Handkerchiefs? When my grandmother, bless her soul, passed away when she was 90 and I was going through her drawers, she had probably 100 handkerchiefs. This is actually one of them. I gave them out to all my family members. It was very easy. This is to-go-ware, bamboo. So easy. I always have in my bag. I use it all the time. I cannot believe how often I use these chopsticks, forks. So personal responsibility can go a long way. A lot of houses use paper towels. Now, these are made out of recycled paper, which is great, you know, but how many of us have old towels or stuff? I don't buy paper towels. I have a drawer full of rags. It is not that hard to actually go and use reuse. Great question. We could be saving so much waste if we just took individual responsibility. But what's really critical is to have cities pass policies to help drive the culture towards reuse. And so, as I mentioned before, with Seattle banning non-recyclable, non-reusable, non-compostable stuff is really important too.
All right, so we have another question from Salvador, Chicago. So we consume all day long. If we could make one change today to make an impact on the environment, what would you suggest that change be?
Well, coming from a teenager's point of view, I feel like there are certain things that can be done every day that are really simple. Like, for example, you have your plastic water bottle. Now, as she said, you shouldn't use single-use items, but say you do. This single-use water bottle can be refilled in a water fountain. It's not going to disappear out of your hands because you refilled it in a water bottle, in a water fountain. And you can also just make sure that you're doing things like not leaving the water running as you're brushing your teeth, or making sure that you, instead of using the dishwasher, you instead of throwing things away, you maybe put it in the dishwasher or things of that nature.
Take action. I would say, you know, one of the hallmarks of a democratic nation is an engaged citizenry. So civic action. I'm just so thrilled to be here with all these young folks, because that's what we need. We need engaged citizenry. And in the United States, if you call your elected officials, if they get 6 calls from their constituents, they will change their position on an issue. So if you're worried about trash, call your elected officials. Take action.
And if we can't get you recycling in your schools, call your elected officials, because again, that's not acceptable. So one thing is so hard because there are many things, but you may be familiar with the 3 R's. Well, at the Alice Ferguson Foundation, I think it's being adopted not just by us but by others. We think there's 4 R's. So, and the first one is rethink. So rethink, reduce, reuse, recycle are the 4 R's. And if you don't know, that's actually a hierarchy. So you should start with rethink. And so if you only have to do one thing, that's what you should do, is rethink. And so rethink what you're doing and figure out ways to not use something that's going to turn into waste, and do some of the things that Brenda has suggested. Reuse those water bottles, but just start thinking about it.
And I would say, if I could pick two, I would say, one, just keep in mind that no matter where you live, it doesn't matter if you're in Chicago or Nebraska or Florida, here in D.C., Brazil, around the world, just keep in mind it doesn't matter where you are, but your actions, both positive and negative, really do have an impact. And so just kind of keep that in mind, is thinking that it's not a problem that's too big to solve. That's one thing that I love about working on the trash issue, is that this is a tangible problem. It's a problem we can all take small actions to help solve. My other thing is pick one thing. I know that was what the question was, pick one thing. But pick one thing that you can actually change in your life. If you really like to use straws, buy a couple reusable straws. I love straws, but they're mostly made out of plastic. They end up on our beaches. They're in our top 10 list of things that are found on our beaches and waterways. You know what? Starbucks, a bunch of different companies, they sell reusable straws. That is one small, tiny thing that you might not even think about, but it's something you can actually change. A straw takes up no space in a backpack or a purse. Or a man bag. So, you can, that's one of my things. Just pick one small thing that you can, it's not too overwhelming, that you can just kind of remember as you carry on your everyday life.
All right, so I think that's all the questions we have, and we're going to move on to the global impacts.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the global impacts like Mika said. So Texas is the largest state in the United States of America. Imagine a landfill the size of Texas filled with garbage. Now imagine the size of that landfill times 2 floating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Do you guys have it in your minds? That's called the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, floating between Hawaii and Japan. This is one of the many global issues we see today due to garbage. So we have a few questions for our panelists. Where does the garbage come from, and what does it contain? Brenda?
Well, it's plastic, in the garbage patch, and it's not marine biodegradable. So of course a lot of it is litter, but not all of it. There were some studies that were done on a beach in California. The Aguilita Marine Research Foundation actually is the group that did some of these, and they found that a lot of the plastics are these nurdles. They're like the little pellets that is what are used, that melt down to make our plastic products. So imagine a factory that's making plastic products and it's inland far away from the ocean. Well, if they have a pile of their product by their rail yard and it rains, some of those pellets wash down to the local stream and into the stormwater, and of course, where does it end up? Anything that goes into a local stream of the stormwater eventually ends up in the ocean. So a lot of the plastics and the growth of plastics in the garbage patch has been exponential in the last decade. So our continued reliance on single-use plastic products is really contributing to the growth here. There's been a big movement on biodegradable, bio-based products. Some of these compostable products, but not all of them are marine biodegradable. So that's really an issue.
And I will just add that there are 5 garbage patches, and they're also called gyres. And they're one in each ocean. And so the Pacific is the most researched. It's the one that we have the most information about. But all 5 of the oceans have them, and they all are, have a wide range of different plastics in there, but all things that we can solve by sort of figuring out how to get plastic out of our lives. And there was also some research being done in the Great Lakes. They also are finding sort of mini gyres. They're not quite the same, but they have a large amount of plastic there. And I just recently on Facebook, a friend of mine who also is involved in plastic pollution just posted they're called trawls, and they drag nets behind boats to collect, fish or things like that. But in this case, they were collected plastic in the Chesapeake Bay. And so it's plastic pollution it's not just an ocean problem, but it's happening right here in our yards. So.
And I'm assuming maybe our discussion about garbage patches is going to continue. But one thing I think to keep in mind that it's easy to kind of imagine if you start thinking about the size of Texas and this landfill. But when you kind of scale it down, what they're actually finding in, especially, again, the Pacific Garbage Patch is the most researched, but are these microplastics. Plastics, these sizes of pieces that are less than 5 millimeters large. So, I mean, they're tiny. You guys know those beads that are in some of like the facial creams or cleansers? Those little tiny beads that are supposed to awaken you? Yeah, that's the size of the things they're finding, and they're finding those beads out in the massive Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean we have. So, that kind of puts it all in scale in the problem, and as maybe we continue this discussion, it's not like we're finding, there are large items out there, yes, but, again, the majority of these items are less than 5 millimeters, across. So just kind of something to keep in mind as we continue.
Okay. How does the garbage affect us as humans in our marine life in the oceans?
Why don't you start?
How does garbage affect us as humans and in marine life? I think I touched on this a little bit earlier, but so we'll talk a little bit more about the marine life. So again, these small pieces of plastic, they pose significant ingestion risks for wildlife, for marine life, ranging from invertebrates all the way to our large marine mammals, the blue whale. I mean, you have these risks. So think about it. If you're, or even a seabird, I don't want to forget the seabird. It's one of the most highly affected animals by marine debris. So if you think about it, you have these tiny pieces of plastic that I just were talking about out in the garbage patch or in the ocean. And seabirds are looking for food. They're flying over. If you think about maybe Lucky Charms, drop a few tiny little pieces of plastic in there. You have this brightly colored cereal, and you're flying, you're kind of eating it, and you're maybe like 2 feet above it. Are you going to be able to tell too easily the difference between the brightly colored marshmallows in there and then the brightly colored pieces of plastic? Probably not, especially if maybe you're just waking up. So again, you might just eat that out of mistaken. So just think about if you're a bird or an animal. It is so easy to eat some of these microplastics when you're trying to just forage for other foods. And again, it's hard to tell the difference. So that's going to be really the ingestion risks. Again, we talked about the economic factors, the ghost nets that, discarded fishing gear, obviously big issues. Entanglement, plastic, the packaging straps, again, pose pretty significant entanglement issues. And we haven't even started really talking about the issues that our marine debris can cause towards these fishermen. Think about a plastic bag floating in the ocean. Yes, it poses ingestion risk for sea turtles, which is a serious issue because sea turtles typically, one of their main diets is jellyfish and squid. So a floating plastic bag can look a lot like these animals, parts of their diet. But also these plastic bags floating in the waterways can also pose economic issues for boaters and for fishermen because they can get sucked into their intake valves and they can get wrapped around the propellers. So it not only affects the animals, it affects us personally. It affects our wallets and just something to keep in mind, again, how massive the effects and the impacts are.
I'll just add that, Allison mentioned how small these plastic particles are, and some of the research in the Pacific Garbage Patch in particular, there's 15 times more plastic particles than plankton. Now, plankton is the source of all life on Earth. So we are, and when marine life and animals now confuse plastic particles for the food they should be eating, we should be concerned. It's gonna impact us.
Okay, now we have some questions from our audience.
Okay, the question was that we were talking about microplastics and how are we going to address or get rid of the microplastics in our waterways. Was that the correct summary of your question? Yes? Okay, perfect. So I would say the first step is really reducing our consumption. People are going to stop creating as much plastic if we stop demanding so much plastic. Supply and demand, that's just how our economy works. So I would say that's really, probably step one is personally stop, attempt to use reusable items. Stop, putting so much emphasis on single-use items. The addressing and getting these microplastics out of our ocean is a serious issue because, again, we talked about the size of it. And if you think about the scale of the Pacific Ocean, we can't just trawl, the entire ocean and hope to take out all of these plastics. And that's the thing, is it's not even just on the surface. These plastic particles, this trash in the ocean goes all the way down into the water column from, the bottom of the ocean floor all the way to floating plastics. So unfortunately, we have this problem where it's not incredibly cost-effective to trawl the entire ocean, the entire Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, all the oceans. Also, if you think about trawling these oceans for searching for plastics, you're not only going to pick up plastics. It's kind of, bycatch in the reverse. We're trying to get something harmful out of the environment, but we're also going to be, trawling for plankton and getting some of these other animals. So, it is this ongoing, this problem. Do you guys want to?
Sure. So one of the things that we're doing here locally, because ultimately what happens locally does impact the globe, it impacts the oceans. And so we work with, of course, the first goal is to change behavior, reduce use, and all of the things that we've been talking about. But we're not there yet, so we have to do something to stop this trash that continues to flow down our streets and into our storm drains and into the river. So we've been working with local jurisdictions to put in trash traps, and I wish I had a picture of one because they're very interesting to see and rather upsetting, actually. But these trash traps are put in the stream. If you could hold this, and if you could hold this. And so they have buoys on them, and the buoys go all the way across the width of a small stream, and then as the trash is flowing downstream towards to the Anacostia or to the Potomac, the trash trap captures all the trash, and then people go in and clean out the trash once a month, once every couple weeks, depending on how much it rains. And that's a small way that on a small stream locally we can capture trash and prevent it from getting to the river and then to the bay and then to the ocean, and then it becomes part of the garbage patch once it reaches the ocean. And so that is they're expensive to maintain, they're expensive to install, we're pulling out plastic that can't really be recycled well anymore because it's very dirty after being in the water. So it's definitely not a long-term solution, but it's a good short-term solution for capturing plastic and preventing it from getting in the water.
Our next question.
That's such a good question. There's probably no good answer. Excuse me, let me repeat the question. The excellent question that Hunter asks is, if we were to get all the plastic out of the ocean, where would we put it? Right now, in the United States anyway, of the trash that we generate, 70% ends up in landfills. Probably another 10% is burned, and we've been at probably 60% is landfill, 10% is burned, and we've been at a 30% recycling level. So depending on the plastic, a lot of plastics are recyclable, and so if it's collected in a way it could be sorted. The technology to sort plastics has really developed in the last few years, where it uses infrared, optical kind of sorting. I mean, you could have pieces of plastic that smaller than your fingernail, and it can be going on a conveyor belt and identified by its unique signature, and then sorted. So depending on the plastic and the shape it's in, there's a possibility. A lot of plastic in the ocean, I would assume, is really very degraded, and so may not have a good end market. So it would probably, if it's collected, end up in a landfill or incinerator.
Should we talk about what happens to plastic when it gets recycled and the difference between plastic and aluminum and glass when they're recycled? Sure. So plastic. So the interesting thing about recycling plastic is it doesn't necessarily get turned back into a plastic water bottle or a plastic bag or something like that. It gets turned into an end product that's its last life. It can be carpet, it can be a sweatshirt, or what are some other examples, Brenda? Board shorts. Lots of different things that are just not going to they're not going to be re-recycled. And so, but cans and bottles, aluminum cans and glass can be infinitely turned back into aluminum cans and glass bottles. So that's just an interesting little fact to know when you're making your choices.
I'll just add something very quickly. I think this is a time what to do with these plastics, to be creative. I mean, think about, we sell pasta as art, to make art with pasta. So what if if we did find a problem, we had a surplus of these small pieces of plastic in, the marketplace, what do we do with them? let's be creative. Can we now, sell it as art, and people can use, they do ocean trash art. There are other companies out there making products out of the, some of the ocean plastics. Right now, it's not incredibly cost effective, but there are people and companies out there, bringing this plastic and making other products out of it. So I think, this is a really great opportunity for young people. You guys are so creative and a lot more than, us at our age. So, really thinking of solutions and markets for this plastic.
I'll just say that one of the big plastic products that ends up in the ocean that has a big impact on birds in particular eating them is bottle caps. And those are made out of number 5 plastics, polypropylene, and there are markets for that. So that's just an example of a product that, perhaps could be collected and recycled. But, one thing, maybe we should talk about is plastics recycling, and you may be aware of it, is that there's, you see the chasing recycling symbol on all of our plastic products. Does that indicate that the product is recyclable? No, does not. So, that's something we really should do away with. So that the plastics industry would like communities to put all types of plastics 1 through 7 in our curbside recycling bins, and then they'll figure out which ones are recyclable. So that really, we begin to think, they want us to think that all these plastics are recyclable, when indeed they're not. And the styrofoam industry in particular is now kind of ramping up, we can collect those lunch trays from schools and we'll recycle them. But it's better to avoid the use of those products.
So, we're kind of getting to the end of our webcast, so we're going to say the answer to the poll question. So the answer is it's shipped to developing countries. Congrats if you got it right. And so the waste is shipped over to overseas, where it just ends up in a landfill, and we're deporting a lot of our trash. So to wrap up, we'll have a final question for each of our panelists, about 30 seconds for each panelist. So what actions can we all take to reduce trash locally and then thus worldwide?
All right, so I believe that the first action that we need to take is becoming aware of how much we're consuming each day. A lot of things that we do consume is unneeded, and once you become aware of how much you're using and how much you're throwing away, then you can solve the problem of finding out how you're supposed to reduce how much you're using.
Yeah, as we talked about it earlier, take action, I think, is really, really important. And I'll just say on the electronics, since it just came up, is that a lot of that material is not landfilled when it's shipped abroad. It's taken apart by in really poor conditions of laborers who are exposed to the toxic heavy metals and whatnot in those electronic consumer products. So, electronics are designed for obsolescence. So we need to really. This is back to, I think, Laura's point about rethink, redesign and rethink. But take action. Get a fire in your belly.
Well, I'm going to have to steal Brenda's, because that's what it takes is taking action and getting involved. And, while you're rethinking, don't spend too much time thinking. Get right into that action as well. So I can't emphasize that enough.
And I would also say we've already hit the watch our consumption and take action. We can take action as small as participating in local cleanups. Alice Ferguson, they do a lot of cleanups here locally, participate around the world in the International Coastal Cleanup. That's kind of the end route for all of this trash. So again, watch our consumption, and then on the flip end, pick it up off our parks and our waterways and our beaches.
We have a question for Kumba. How can we as youth help solve this issue or reduce the effect? And this is from Doha Musab bin Omar School in Qatar.
All right, so I believe that the main thing that we can do, there are 2 steps. Make yourself aware, and then, as everybody has repeated saying, is take action. So in doing so, taking action, a lot of people believe that, oh, I'm only one person, I can't change anything, I need a whole bunch of people to support me in order for me to do something about it. But it's as simple as, I see a water bottle on the floor, I'm going to pick it up and put it in the recycling bin. Or I see a piece of paper on the floor, I'm going to pick it up and put it in the recycling bin. And then you're going to start a chain reaction throughout your community, once it goes from your community, it could start globally, because they're going to follow in suit and see what you're doing and see that you're actually making a change.
Oh, we have some questions from our audience.
Okay, briefly, I would say, when we talk about genetically engineering and introducing bacteria and different, species into an ecosystem, we always have to watch out for unintended consequences. And so that's something I think we would want to know, the full spectrum of consequences, both positive and negative, before, any action such as that was taken. Because again, sometimes, especially as humans, we think we're doing something good when 10 years later we go, oh, why did we do that? I wish I would have known better. So I think that's kind of key, is to really think about, the full spectrum of introducing something into an ecosystem.
I'll just say that, and the question was, a lot of our, at some of our sewage treatment plants, they use microorganisms to break down the solids so that, they can be used. And so a lot of those systems are anaerobic digestion, where they convert organic material into biogas, which is actually like natural gas, a good product. So we're seeing more of that. There are now, you're seeing on the market biodegradable plastics. And so, and Seattle, which has banned polystyrene, for instance, styrofoam, you're seeing compostable plastics. So we're going to see more bio-based, compostable, biodegradable plastics. There probably are ways to break down some of the fossil fuel-based plastics with microorganisms. I wouldn't be surprised, but I completely agree with Allison on the genetically modified organisms. It's probably not the road we want to go down.
Okay, so we've reached the end of our webcast. We'd just like to thank the Global Nomads Group and the Qatar Foundation International for supporting the Road to Doha group. We'd like to thank our wonderful panelists. Thank you for joining us today. We'd like to thank our audience, both here live and joining us virtually. And Washington Latin Public Charter School for letting us host this webcast. So thank you so much, and that's it.